Astrobot's dope.
In fact, it's so good, I think it's actually going to help change the direction of the entire gaming industry. So today, I'm going to go over the secrets that Astrobot and its developers utilized to become such a hit in such a short amount of time. And I am not kidding when I say that this little robot is going to push a trend that I think many of us are going to be happy to see. Now, if you've been living under a rock, Astrobot has been killing it over the past couple of weeks, scoring a whopping 94 out of 100 on Metacritic, becoming the highest scoring full release game of the entire year of 2024. And it's only been beaten by Elden Ring DLC by one singular point, and is 2 points ahead of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. A couple of months back, I made a video that claimed that Astrobot was the heart that PlayStation was missing. Now, I would like to add that Astrobot was the heart that the entire gaming industry was missing. Now, I know, hold on, diehard Nintendo fans, you're gonna yell at me, and I get it. Don't worry, all credit to Mario, but hold on to your Joy-Cons. I'm gonna explain. Trust me, trust the man who has the same mustache as Mario. Astrobot has done something that is brilliant. But the genius behind Astrobot starts before his newest title. It starts as a VR game. The PSVR only has a few titles, in my opinion, that are worth picking up, and Astrobot Rescue Mission is actually one of them. It's a fun, cute game that puts all the tools that the PSVR has to full use. This establishes the character. And even though the player base for PSVR is much smaller in comparison to the regular PlayStation console or just home consoles in general, because Astrobot stood on top of that PSVR mountain, even players who didn't even own or have an interest in PSVR knew about Astrobot. Then, which I believe was even more impactful than Astrobot Rescue Mission, was that we had Astro's Playroom. Now, this was a fun 3D platformer that broke out of the PSVR and makes it seem like Astro is playing inside of your PlayStation 5 and DualSense controller. It's, again, the perfect game that places all of PS5's capabilities on full display, specifically with the DualSense controller. But here is where it is key. It was free.
Free?
Every single PlayStation 5 that shipped came with a free copy of Astro's Playroom. And if you don't have it, you can actually go to the PlayStation Store now and download it for free. So even if you decided not to buy any games day one, Astro's Playroom was there. This introduced the character to basically each and every PS5 owner and establishes an even stronger brand recognition. And to boot, it was actually a pretty fun game, scoring an average of an 8.3 out of 10. Not bad for a game that was built to basically demo all the features of the PS5. So what could be done next with Astrobot to really just crack it out of the park? Well, it would be to create a full-priced, full-title game. Now, this is actually going to be a challenge because the game has to be really good for people to feel okay with paying extra money for Astrobot, since this will be Astro's first full-priced title. Now, remember how mad some people got over Crash Bandicoot 4 being full-priced? That was because the Insane Trilogy and CTR Nitro Fueled were discounted due to their remastered nature. So many expected that Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time would be the same price as those, and it was not. Now, even though that game scored higher in terms of Metacritic score over CTR and Insane, and was a brand new game and was not based on a remaster, it was the first original Crash Bandicoot game in a long time, many people were still upset because they were conditioned by the price. So Astrobot, starting off as a discounted PSVR game, and then a free game that came with your PlayStation 5 had an initial uphill battle. But Team Asobi, the team behind Astrobot, not only got over that hurdle and challenge, they literally cranked it out of the park and into a different park. Like I said, the game scored a 94 out of 100 and is the highest rated full price release title in 2024 so far. But there are great games that come out every single year. So why, oh why is Astrobot going to change the industry, Canadian Guy A? What secrets did Team Asobi discover? It's simple, actually. Whenever you think of a company that makes great platformer titles, the first thing that people think of in general is Nintendo. Nintendo has been kings of this space for decades, with games like Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario Odyssey being considered as masterclasses in 3D platforming. And that's before we even include the fact that Super Mario 64 is basically the core DNA of all modern 3D platformers. But to the general public, outside of Nintendo's games, while there are many great ones, Crash and Spyro being my favorite, but again, according to the general public, there's nothing that is even close to Mario. So, with Mario being the most dominant and Nintendo in general being a household name to 3D platforming beyond just Mario, who could possibly go up against that? Who? And over time, the longer a brand stays dominant, competitive companies become more complacent. Basically, they're not going to try to go up and beat Mario. Of course, Mario is going to kill it with every game. He's one of one. Nintendo is the king of that market. So companies will turn and focus on other genres and other games. Why bother? Well, now there is a legitimate competitor, a mold breaker outside of Nintendo, and that's Astrobot. Astrobot proved that you can make a 3D platformer outside of the Nintendo brand and be a masterclass to the general public. This is going to cause companies of all shapes and sizes, including PlayStation themselves, to stop and look. Every time a game that blows the doors off the hinges, other companies sit down and think, can we do it? Can we replicate a portion of this success? And like I said, if it was Mario, most companies would kind of shrug and move on. Yeah, Mario won it again. Woo, good job, guys. Yay. But it's not Mario this time. It's Astrobot. And it is made exclusively by Sony. Companies are going to look at the success of Astrobot and start considering that maybe they also could replicate Mario's success. If a smaller team at Sony could replicate Mario's level of success, make Astrobot in 3 years, and with a modest budget, what's stopping them? I believe that many of these companies are going to start looking at their own library of old IP and ask, can we do something with any of these titles that are already established? Astrobot is a relatively new IP that is still kind of building in recognition. Could you imagine what a team that worked like Team Asobi did with an actual recognizable nostalgic IP? You might get a really powerful game there. And because of that theory in mind, they're going to start analyzing how to properly utilize these old nostalgic properties. This means Xbox may turn and say, man, we need to get cracking on a new Crash Bandicoot game and get that into development. And maybe we can find someone and really push to do a Banjo-Kazooie. Or Sony and PlayStation themselves might turn and say, hey, that Astrobot game was awesome. Let's try and replicate that success again. Maybe we can bring life back to Ape Escape, or maybe Jak and Daxter, or even Sly Cooper. And that is before we get to a slew of new IP and new games that might get approved and greenlit simply because of Astrobot's success. Okay, so I just told you that the trend that Astrobot might set. But what is the secret? Well, Team Asobi, the studio behind Astrobot, has been very public with how they actually developed the project. The whole game was made in about 3 years and with only about 60 people. 60 people. That's it. That is amazing because this is a stark difference in comparison to the modern AAA title today, where hundreds of employees can work on one title for upwards to a decade across the globe and in different languages. Now, Nicholas Doucette, the director of Astrobot, actually explained that at one point they were trying to decide whether or not they wanted to go for a bigger open world game. But as they continued to explore and iterate on Astrobot, they came to a stark reality that helped them figure out their blueprint to success. Here is what he had to say.
People are craving for these kind of games. They're back to basics, back to simple basics. Again, I insist on that, but I think well executed because, you can eat a lot of food at a buffet, or you can just go for that 2-course meal that is really going to be small and just the right amount. But this one is going to be memorable.
Instead of focusing on scale and playtime and engagement, which would make Astrobot be like an all-you-can-eat buffet, they knew their audience enough that if they made a game that was much smaller but focused, like a 2-course meal, that it would be just enough to satisfy, but most of all, be memorable. And that is the secret. Focused, smaller scaled games that are incredibly polished and focuses on fun. Additionally, according to Nicholas, the smaller team allowed for faster communication and feedback. Every couple of weeks, the team would come together and actually play the game. I know, right? They actually played the game. Everyone would say what they liked and what could be improved, and ideas were taken from everyone and anyone, no matter what your position on the team was. This is a stark difference when you're on a project that houses hundreds of people that span across the globe in different languages. A quick question or an idea can take a long time to be simply answered or even sorted out. And by the time it's answered, the time for that idea may have already passed. But Nicholas Doucette's comment actually touched on not only what the secret is to Astrobot, but one of the biggest issues in AAA game space today. There are far too many games that match the description of being an all-you-can-eat buffet, and I think it's legitimately poisoning the entire industry. The success of these engagement farming games like Fortnite, Overwatch, Call of Duty, and more has caused AAA publicly traded companies to send its developers to chase after making the next big Titan online game. But in doing so, has left behind much of what made people fans of games to begin with, while also sinking an absolute bonkers amount of time and resources into projects that either live for a very short period of time or don't even release at all. One of the reasons why Fortnite and Overwatch were successful is because at the time there wasn't a very big market and they found something that people really enjoyed and they tapped into. But now people have been chasing this trend, and because they're chasing a trend of engagement farming, it's causing a lot of games to last for such a short period of time because they're not matching the success of these Titan games. And when they realize how much money has been sunk into it, they just pull out immediately. And that is not good for any part of the industry. And to really add on to that, we can literally see that in today's environment. So let's look at something that is actually a bit more recent and not just in the aether. And I know everyone's gonna jump up and say Concord, and yes, it does apply in this example because it was following a trend that was dealing with Overwatch, but we're going to actually go to a project that didn't even make it as far as Concord, and that was Project Odyssey, Blizzard's canceled online survival game. This was going to be a brand new IP for Blizzard and was in development for 6 years. And when the project was canned, it had up to 200 people working on it. That's double the development time of Astrobot, with over 3 times the amount of employees, and they didn't even release a game, a trailer, or even give it a final name. Now, yes, of course, this game was going to be much bigger in scale than Astrobot, but how much money did Project Odyssey make? How much engagement did it draw? How many microtransactions were bought? 0. Donuts. And that is just one example. We can even look at Concord as yet another example of these gigantic games and teams turning out a net loss. So much so that the game was disconnected a little bit more than 2 weeks after its official launch. This model that we have seen in hundreds of games is not sustainable. So, here's a thought I want you to think about. Imagine if Blizzard had taken the same budget, whatever it was, that was sunk into Odyssey, hired one more person, and split that team of now 201 employees into 3 teams. And each team followed the same method that Team Asobi applied. In about half the time, they would theoretically have 3 finished titles. Now let me tell you something, I would take 3 finished and polished games over 1 gigantic never-ending online one. What Asobi has shown is that games like Astro are not only possible outside of the halls of Nintendo, but that a game like this could be made in a smaller, healthier work environment. And that smaller work environment is actually not a hindrance, but an advantage. Astrobot also shows that companies who have access to legendary IP could tap into it and follow the business model set by Team Asobi. This will likely increase the number of projects completed while also not costing as much money as these gigantic scaled projects that are so risky they might not even come out. It is a much more sustainable model for the games industry as a whole, and if any of these companies have even an ounce of intelligence, they would take advantage of it right now. Which is why I think more games from the past have more of a shot at coming back because of Astrobot's success. But which games could we be seeing? In this video right here, I explain how, after speaking to many people, that a brand new Spyro title is currently in active development.